Hey, all my IFG friends, this is Steve. I want to say, if you like movies like I do, we've started a new podcast called Happy Hour Flicks. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. It's all about nostalgic movies that we love, and we bring on special guests each episode, and we also have specialty cocktails made for each one, too. So it really is an hour of a good time talking about movies that we love, like Gremlins, Seven, Free Willy. We talk about The Last Starfighter also. I mean, we kind of run the gamut across all the decades and really have a great time. So wanted to invite you to come over and join us. That's Happy Hour Flicks, anywhere podcasts are found. Just a note on today's episode. When I spoke to our guest last fall about his movie Silo, it was yet unreleased. Now, they've received distribution through Oscilloscope and can be seen nationwide in theaters as well as on demand.
And in rural America, people are just all about community and all about helping out their neighbors. And they said, wow, these New Yorkers want to make a movie about farming. We'll help them any way we can. And that's pretty much how the movie got made.
This is the
Independent
Filmmaker's Guide
from Framework Productions.
Framework
Productions.
On IFG, we talk about independent film from development through delivery. By featuring discussions with creators and collaborators about their experiences, we form a roadmap to help you have the most success with your projects. The role of producer often wears many hats, and in indie filmmaking, they wear hats upon hats. What do? They make it happen. Today, we speak with Sam Goldberg about his journey through the creation of his film. He'll talk through everything from securing the locations for filming to finding theaters for distribution and all the relationships he formed along the way. We'll hear how he made it all happen for the new film, Silo.
Agriculture is the single most dangerous occupation in America, and grain entrapments happen 35, 40, 45 times a year, more than half of them in fatalities, more than half of them people were teenagers.
That's Sam Goldberg, producer for the movie Silo. Significant part of the movie takes place inside a grain silo with, active corn. How much corn was actually in there? I'm your host, Stephen Pierce. But how did you get to be in the independent film producing world, and how did this film come across your slate?
So I started working in the entertainment business as an 8-year-old. I did radio voiceovers and some commercials. I grew up in New York City, and I always wanted to be an entertainer. And I thought at first that was going to be in front of the camera or on the stage. And for about 6-7 years, I auditioned every day, and I did some work that made money that eventually helped pay for some of my independent film business, believe it or not. And when I got into high school, I was more interested in basketball than acting. And I was like, I wonder why that is. Maybe I'm not as passionate about acting as I thought I was. And so, but still, it was all about storytelling on some level. And so when I went to university, I studied English, I studied film, I graduated, worked in the documentary field for years, but always had my eye on creating the scripted films that I grew up loving. Some of the iconic ones like Forrest Gump or Gladiator or Braveheart, As Good as It Gets, Cool Runnings. I'm like a 90s kid, I guess. And so I just loved all those films. And so what I was doing at the time was developing IP adaptations. So when I graduated university in 2009, the recession had hit. Most studios had closed down their New York City offices and or fired their New York City book and theater scouts. So there was a huge void left behind in New York City where so much intellectual property comes from. You've got theater, you've got music, you've got literature, publishing. And so I decided instead of moving to LA to pursue my interest in developing original stories, I'd stay in New York, try and develop original scripts, and see if eventually when the movie business really reinvigorated itself after the recession, if I could be sitting there with great screenplays that people would want to make with me. That thesis was incorrect from a business standpoint. Nobody bought my scripts or worked. Well, I had a business partner, and I have a business partner. I had an original business partner. I had my partner, Elon. We've been working together for 7 years now, and nobody's really purchased those scripts from us, but we developed a storytelling skill set, the patient development skill set, which is I'm not turning around a script in a month or 2 months. It's 20 drafts, 25 drafts, 30 drafts, really needling in on every word, every character, every theme. And so while we were doing that, we developed a script called From the Ruins, which was with two great writers, Rachel Lambert and Nathan Gregorski. And they had just had a trip to Nashville, Tennessee, where they met a filmmaker named Marshall Burnett, who had just heard an NPR radio story about a grain entrapment accident. I had never heard of that until they mentioned those words to me. But in short, a grain entrapment is when somebody is working on a farm and they're in a grain silo or a grain storage bin, and they get entrapped in the grain. And most of the time that ends in a fatality, where somebody goes underneath the grain and literally drowns in corn or soy or wheat or peanuts or whatever they're storing on their farm. That image evoked from you, sorry, not that image, that concept, that pitch evoked just such a horrifying image in my brain, and it stuck with my business partner and myself. And so we said, we'd love to meet Marshall. He came up to New York City. At the time, we had only produced a short film. Most of our feature scripts, the budgets were too big. As I mentioned, I was trying to set them up at studios, and we were trying to be these New York IP folks, and it wasn't quite computing. And so when Marshall came up to New York from Tennessee and pitched us this idea, we were hooked. And we basically said, we're not working on anything until we make this movie. That was in 2014, September 2014. And here we are in 2020, having released the film a year ago, August of 2019. But the journey was really one of wanting to tell stories in front of the camera, realizing I wanted to tell stories any way I could, and then realizing that the skill set that I thought I could employ was connecting the dots and being a facilitator of artistic vision. And I think that's more or less what producers do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can sum it up any better than that. I mean, sometimes producers end up, also getting coffee and, cleaning out hotel rooms or driving. Yeah, literally, I don't think you can find anything that there isn't in on the definition of what a producer does do. But so let's talk a little about making silos. So 2014, you hear the idea, you were committed to this idea now. What was your first step and what actually what actually happened? When did this become a thing and not just an idea?
That's a great question. Well, Marshall made it a thing by handing us a physical lookbook, which I thought was very smart. He came with a laminated lookbook with essentially the plot of the movie in visual stock footage.
Oh, interesting.
And in that moment, for me, it was real. I was like, oh, this isn't just one of our ideas. This seems like it's an indie. Seems like it doesn't have to be the biggest budget. This could be a real thing that we could physically produce. So once you have that, you need a writer. And Rachel and Nathan were supposed to write this script, but actually, fortunately for them, their first feature got greenlit in February of 2015. So they had to drop out of the project. 2 days later, sheer coincidence and luck, which you need a million times over to make anything in this business, probably in any entrepreneurial endeavor, luck is a huge part of life. I met a writer named Jason Williamson, who grew up on and around his grandparents' farm in North Carolina. And he was a playwright and is a playwright in New York City, an incredibly talented one. And I was meeting him in the context of theater. At the time, I was producing live theater events for the Soho House, which is a members club that's in New York and LA and around the world. And I said, Jason, have you ever been commissioned to do a screenplay before? He said, no. I said, I've got an idea for you. He said, I get it. He's like, I know these characters. I know these people. If you'd give me a chance, I'd love to write this script. And so we hired him, and that was that next big step. And if I know your podcast, which I love, you really go into the nitty gritty. Hiring Jason means a couple of things.
Yeah, that was literally what I was going to ask next.
Yeah. One, it means I have to make a financial offer to his agent, Michael at WME. Great guy. Two, once that offer is negotiated, I have to get my entertainment lawyer to write up a contract to put this in writing. And I remember early in my career, I didn't work with it. I didn't do any contracts. I was like, oh, it's handshakes. I love you. You love me. We'll figure it out. I'm a very optimistic, hopeful guy. And I think there's nothing better you can do in this industry than get everything on paper. It will cost you more later. You think you're wasting money on lawyers now. It's going to cost you 3 times as much in a year if you don't make it clear. And it's awkward at first. And most people in film, we don't love business. Most of us started off as artists, and sometimes we become business people / artists. But once you create boundaries for your relationship, then you can just fly free. And all those questions and awkward conversations, they're done. You don't ever have to have them again. And so thankfully with Jason, I learned from those mistakes, contract right away. And so he went on an R&D trip with Marshall. He flew to Tennessee. They drove through Kentucky. They went to Illinois. They went to Indiana. They met farmers and they met agricultural professors and they met farm safety experts. And they just started aggregating info. They were just pulling together research and development to get ready to write the script. And by the time they got back from that trip in 2015, I think it was April or May of that year, they had the plot ironed out. So from there, it was time for Jason to write. He sent us an outline. We said, let's go. He delivered the first draft 2 months later, and we were like enamored of the whole thing. It was a wonderful, probably the best first draft of any script I've ever read. And from there, a lot of things happened to make it happen. But that was the first big step, is connecting writer director and making sure that we had our contracts in order and getting an outline and a script going.
That's interesting. I think you're the first person I've talked to that actually commissioned like an IP, like commissioned a story with a writer. So were you like, whenever you committed in 2014, were you already financing it, or was this just you guys that were putting up the initial startup to get that going?
Yeah, just the initial startup. So our strategy, honestly, it still is our strategy, because my business partner and I, we're not sitting on millions of dollars. We're at times we're sitting on thousands of dollars. And we figured, okay, rather than having a writer spec something out, right? And when a writer is speccing something out, which is great and important a lot of the time, it usually means it's not their A project, because they've got to make money somehow. Right. So it's the thing they're doing at night, the thing they're doing on the weekends. We felt early on in our careers, even if we can offer a writer, excuse me, $1,000 or $2,000 to get us a draft, so they know we value their work. If we could afford to do that and support the arts, but also make sure that this was something that was a priority in their financial life, then we could turn around a quicker draft and we can get things moving.
And you might get the kind of more brain space from them as well.
That's kind of a big part of it. And so we decided we would come out of our own pocket just for the script, which was not a large amount of money. I won't divulge, because I don't want Jason's agent and Jason to get upset at me. But we committed that money early on, but we committed it not knowing we had any other money to make the film. Yeah.
Okay, great. I mean, that's a great first step, and really interesting. It sounds like in creating your original script, if you're not the writer, I know that a lot of directors are not writers. That's an amazing way to know how to do it, and a great approach. So now that once you got into that, what is the next major waypoint? Seems to me probably now you got to finance the film. Did you go for cast first? Did you go for just start trying to approach investors? How did that whole process start, and what was your strategy then?
So we spent, I'd say, the next 6 months between summer 2015 and January 2016 honing in on the script. So we probably did 3 to 5 drafts between that time. And then once we had a draft of the script we thought was really great, we got it to a line producer friend, my friend Javier Gonzalez, awesome independent film producer out of New York. And the budget came in. And when we originally spoke to Marshall, we hoped that it would be a $500,000 film that we can raise money through friends and family and through a state tax credit. Okay, we figured between, if we could shoot in New York, well, not necessarily New York, but if we shoot in Kentucky or Oklahoma or Louisiana, great tax credits for 35% of your budget, that could cover 150, 175 grand, and the rest we'd raise in $5,000 to $25,000 pieces. We would just scrape. Budget came in.
Just to clarify on that strategy, that plan is, so 500, say your budget's $100,000, you have a 30% tax credit in New York. Mm-hmm. So your plan was to raise $70,000, get the tax credit, use the last $30,000 for finishing funds, P&A, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, that was my original plan.
Right. I'm just making sure I understand the strategy versus we raise $100,000 and use the $30,000 tax credit as an incentive for the investor.
Well, actually, so there's a third option, which is what we ended up going with.
Okay.
So you're 100% right. Both of those are the first two things I thought we would do. And then an old friend of mine who is in the finance business called me and asked me a bunch of questions about tax credits. He wanted to start a company where he would cash roll those tax credits. So for example, what we ended up doing with our movie is we shot in Kentucky. And I think the state of Kentucky ended up giving us upwards of $200,000 commitment for our tax credit on the film. This investor, he's a lender. He's not really an investor. He loaned us the money at 10% interest. So he gave us, or maybe it was 12, no, I think it was 10%. Yeah, it was 10% interest. So he gave us $180,000 before we shot the film. So it was amazing. It wasn't like we had to wait for that money to come in. He ended up being a huge chunk of our budget, or a nice chunk of our budget, that we put towards the film. So that's the third option. First option, like you said, let it be a gap for post, but that's risky because those tax credits don't always come in quickly.
Right. Or
That's
yeah, exactly. So you're sitting on it and you're holding it.
Yeah. Or at all, by the way. There's some states
Right.
where they have a financial issue as a state, and they stop giving them out. That happened in a couple of states. It upset some people. Two is what you said, use the tax credit to give back money to investors. That's what we're doing now with our post tax credit.
Right. That's most conventional.
Yeah.
Most conventional.
Our New York post credits going back to investors, and that'll be due. That's coming due in a couple of months. Third option was raise the money as a loan. And you have to take a loan seriously, because if you have any issues with equity, they're equity partners. They're all on the same footing. If God forbid something had happened with our movie, right? Let's say we had to stop production. Let's say we had $5,000 left in our account because we couldn't shoot for 2 months. The lender is your senior lender. They end up actually owning your film. That's the way debt works. So you're taking a risk. But if you're a responsible producer and you have enough equity in the bank, and you have to give them bank statements, I did, he was a friend, but he looked at my bank statements. He said, "Oh, have you raised the equity you said you were going to raise?" And we did. And so then we took on that loan, which helped finance the film.
Amazing. So did you end up, so you got 180 grand against that 200 write up. So that 20% there at your interest, or that 20 grand's your interest. And then how much did you end up just scraping the rest? And was it $500,000 at the end?
I won't say what the budget was. It wasn't $500,000. I wish it was $500,000.
Yeah. I was about to say, damn, like really impressive.
Going back to where we were in the story is 2016, we get our draft of the script. I send it to Javier. He sends me back a budget. And I say, damn, we ain't doing this for $500,000. So I called Marshall and I said, listen, we've been working together for 1.5 years now. We've got something special here, but we can't make it this summer. I wanted us to. It's not going to be possible. What can we do? And he said, I'll call you right back. And to his credit, he came up with this idea, I want to say in like 4 hours. And he said, I love what movies like Obvious Child, Whiplash, I love what they've done. They created a proof of concept short scene of their film that got into Sundance, and then that helped launch their bigger movie. But he said, for our movie is very action heavy, very thriller heavy, and we're not going to be able to afford to do the type of scene that would really evoke the interest of investors or even audience members in the way that I'd want to. So he pitched me a docu-narrative hybrid that he'd like to make about the day in the life of a farm town that had just been through one of these accidents, a grain entrapment. And he said, why don't we make something just really authentic and really interesting? We'll shoot some of it in 16 millimeter film. We'll shoot some of it on a red Alexa camera. I have a crew of guys who can come up. We ended up doing it in Indiana because we had a farm connection there. So it was a 4-hour drive from the Nashville airport, and we'll just scrape it together. So he pitched me that February of 2016. I had just met an investor, a guy named Carl Radke, who is the nicest guy. And he just said, I have $20,000 that I want to put towards an artistic endeavor. I want to be a supporter of the arts. I want to be in the film industry. And I said, I got a project. I just spoke to my director. And if you want to be an equity investor in my big film, I'll roll over your investment in this short film, and I'll make the big film own the short and the feature. And we'll go make the short, and we'll see if it unlocks any potential. The short, I'm very proud of the short. I'm not sure you got a chance to watch it, actually, because it's very separate from the feature, and I'll send it to you after the podcast. I was really proud of it. And we went to shoot it in May of 2016, and it got into Tribeca for 2017, Tribeca Film Festival. And then we invited all of our prospective investors in 2017 to come see the short. And so we were able to raise a good chunk of our bigger budget movie basically in April of 2017 at the Tribeca Film Festival. However, we still could not raise enough for the feature. So we were 3 weeks away from going into pre-production, and we decided to push. It was heartbreaking. I did not think we were ever going to make the big movie Silo at that point. We had our line producer in Kentucky. We had our location picked out. We had everything dialed in. I thought it was going to happen, but honestly, the budget shortfall was like $500,000, and it just would have been irresponsible to even start day one. So I pulled the plug, cried a bunch. My wife was a rock. Any advice to any independent filmmakers, make sure you have some sort of rock. Make sure you have somebody you can vent to, because it's hard. I mean, starting any company is hard, but when you're producing or even directing an independent film, you're managing so many people, and you take on a lot of personalities, and you take on the responsibility of giving people work and a job. And when it does or doesn't work out, but a lot of the times, more times than often, it doesn't work out, you're basically fighting inertia working against you. Like if you think about a movie, right? If you think about making a movie in the reality of the planet we live in, not pre-COVID reality, it's a gargantuan undertaking. It is so many people, so many schedules, so many weather events, so many financial contingencies. There's about 100 things that have to go right in perfect harmony for a movie to get made. Forget it even being good, just for it to get made. And so you're taking on all of that, and it's very painful. So I mean, I was lucky. My wife she was a rock and a good business guide behind the scenes, and she said, just hang tight. Why don't you and Marshall take a break for a couple of months and reconnect in September? So we did. September 20. Do you mind that I'm just going through the whole journey like this?
Man, I'm loving it. I'm living it with you.
So yeah, well, it was tough. And thankfully we had great investors, and a lot of them said, "Oh, you're pushing? That's fine. We will be in. Whenever you make this movie, we'll stay in." And so the budget shortfall came in the form of having no real way to film a grain entrapment. Okay. You have to recreate a circumstance where somebody is literally being consumed by and drowning in corn. So think about the way that looks, right? Think about a movie you've seen that's a coal mining rescue. You have to have actors underground, ropes, harnesses, safety, stunts. And I had never produced a feature before. So not only did I not know exactly what it should cost a lot of the time, but this was heavy stunt stuff. This was dangerous stuff. But we knew the only way to make this film was if we partnered with individuals locally. Like the movie's about a local small community. So we knew if we could partner with local folks and get them invested emotionally in this film, that we could scrape together a ton of in-kind value. And so in 2017, because we were so far off on the budget, I didn't even have the time to focus on building those relationships. I was all focused on cash. So I called Marshall in September and I said, "Are you down to go at this again?" He said, "Yes." We spent a few months being very, very close to having Finn Wolfhard be the star of the movie, who was from Stranger Things. And we thought it was going to happen with CAA, and it fell through. And then we said, well, if we're going to be a cast contingent movie, we're not going to get made. We're not a sexy enough film. We're a first-time director, first-time producer. Nobody really knows us that much about us. We're working hard. We're doing things in the industry, but we're no great shakes. We just have to cast the best possible cast, and we have to lower our budget however we can. So Marshall, Jason, and myself in March of 2018 went to my aunt and uncle's house in New Jersey. We did not use the internet for 3 days. We turned a movie that had 221 scenes. So I printed, if you have Final Draft, you can print each scene, exterior, farm, day. You can print each scene onto like index cards or something. So I printed 221 scenes. We put them up on the wall. And then we said, how do we turn this into 100 scenes? How do we do that? Because then we can make this movie with the money that we have committed. Done. We don't need any cast contingencies. We don't need any agents involved. It could just be us. We can go at this like true independent warriors. We did it. In 3 days, we got down to like 95 scenes. We didn't use the internet until we sent the outline back to ourselves. And we sent it to my business partner, Elon, who is a co-producer, my co-producer and actual capital P producer on the film as well. He said, I dig it. I think this will work. It's a different movie, but same core concept. Let's do it. And from there, we rewrote the script. Jason delivered a new script like April 20th, because as I mentioned earlier, he's just a beast of a writer and ridiculously talented. We've worked on 3 other screenplays together now. He's just amazing to work with. And then we got our money in the bank early May, but we were still short a lot of opportunity. How do I even describe this? We could not figure out how to do this grain entrapment scene. Bottom line, how do you pretend to drown actors in corn safely for basically something that's a studio style thing, right? Like you can't do it in an active grain bin. You have to build like an ant farm. You have to build 3/4 of a grain bin, put in corn, use a hydraulic lift to make it look like they're going underneath the corn. It's wild. You have to, do CGI rope paint outs because they have to be harnessed. So much stuff. So I ended up learning about a family-owned business called Sukup Manufacturing. They're the largest family-owned grain bin and grain dryer operation. We could do a separate podcast about how much I've learned about farm
about
technology.
corn and the storage of grains.
It's outrageous. It's too much. But anyway, I heard about the Sukups, and they're not a publicly traded company. They're a family company, which means they can make decisions they want. So I called their head of HR. I told her what we were doing, and she said, I talked to the CEO. She said he'd like to meet you. So I flew into Minneapolis, Minnesota. I think it was May of that year. I drove 3 hours south with with Joel Sisson, who's a total genius. He was our art director and the set designer for the grain entrapment stuff. So he's like a mad scientist engineer. One of the smartest, most amazing artists I've ever worked with. I love Joel. He's like the kindest guy. He lives in rural Minnesota. He picked me up at the airport. We drove south. I sat with Steve Sukup and his daughter, Emily, and his son-in-law, Matt, and 2 of their engineers. And we pitched them this idea. In the moment, they were like, we're in. We'll build it all for you for free. Just do it here in Iowa. So we had our movie done because they probably brought, I don't know how much in-kind value they brought, but they must have brought $500,000 plus of in-kind value to our film in terms of engineers that they provided on the project, steel materials. They ended up giving us an airplane hangar that they used and built in northern Iowa at a private airport. So we shot 2 weeks in Kentucky between July 30th and August 10th of 2018. Then we bussed our entire cast and crew to northern Iowa, 13 hours for 2 weeks there to do all of our set building and all of our grain entrapment stuff. And then we drove back to Kentucky for our last week of production. And our final night of production was a scene in the movie where there's a car crash. We didn't shoot the car crash itself. It wasn't something we could afford, but it was post-car crash in a lake, in a river. And it was with the wonderful Jeremy Holm, who's the reason I'm talking to you today, because he's an amazing friend and incredible actor. His last day on set, he spent about 10 straight hours chest deep in dirty river water. But that's how it got done. Sukup Manufacturing and the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, who gave us 2 free fire trucks, 2 free police cars. They brought 5 to 10 extras for free every day. They had an EMS for us on set every day. And then Quentin Leah Pottinger, who were the farm owners, didn't charge us to shoot on their farm for all that time. Pre-production, we redid their entire basement for the film. They were incredible. So we had these 3 strategic partners, Dale Dobson with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, Quentin Pottinger and Leah and his wife and his mom and dad who let us shoot on their farm, and then the Sukups. And together they basically accounted for probably half of our budget. So definitely any independent film, you have to beg, borrow, and steal, or you have to just ask really nicely. And in rural America, people are just all about community and all about helping out their neighbors. And they said, wow, these New Yorkers want to make a movie about farming. We'll help them any way we can. And that's pretty much how the movie got made.
That is an incredible story. And the fact that you can remember all the names and everything on top of your mind is really, I'm envious of. Like, I feel like you've drank like a whole glass of ginkgo biloba right before you did this and really just fired up the synapses, because you just ripped them right off of there, man. So, I mean, I'm not even sure where I want to start dissecting that. It's really incredible that you found all that in kind. And I think that is something that we've found to be consistent amongst most independent films, is that because there comes a point where you can only raise so many cash dollars, right? And you have to have cash money to make a movie, at least if you're being serious about it. But then comes times where locations and things like I cannot believe wanted to talk about that grain silo from the beginning. And the fact that you found a person willing to be invested in that and bring all of that for you to be able to do that is truly incredible. Feels like a real keystone for the film.
It was unreal. It was unreal. We would not have made the movie without them. There's no chance. We would have probably had to do like like an abstract thing where we can kind of see somebody kind of in corn. But the movie really hinges
on understanding
this visual of, oh, this actually happens. There are people who harvest corn or soy or whatever it is, and they go into grain bins, and there's a possibility that the grain engulfs them like quicksand. Um, and just like when I say it, I swear, I just now as I said it, I got chills running up my spine, because it's so, A, just viscerally horrendous, but B, it's this metaphor for modern day agriculture and how difficult it is to be a farmer today. I think a lot of us, especially in coastal cities and areas, who are fairly liberal leaning and all that, and might have a certain image of what the American farmer is. I know I did before I went to Indiana in 2016 to make the short film. I know I had some preconceived notions that were probably unfair. And then you really get into the nitty gritty of what people go through and how challenging it is to keep the farm afloat. And it might be in your family for 5, 6, 7 generations. And you might just be a function of a globalized society that's just bearing you down and making it harder to make money. And so I really empathize with them. I think that's why I remember their names. It's because these are people who they were, I'm a New York City kid who thought he'd be making like Woody Allen style movies my whole career, but I was privileged enough to get a window into a world that I otherwise would have known nothing about. And we're talking now, Steve. I moved with my wife and daughter a month ago to a farm in Pennsylvania. I'm calling you from a farm, and we have totally changed our lives. And this movie has been a massive philosophical shift for us. So it's been cool, and all these people helping out, like you said, like it's not just about cash. Just get back into the logistics of a movie, right? It's time. So if you're at a location, right, and you've paid them $500 for the day, but it's all business for them, if they say you have it from 10 to 6 and 6 hits, they're going to be like, get out or give me more money. If you're working with people, even if you're paying them, but if you're working with them and they understand the spirit of the deal and they're in it with you, they'll say, stay as long as you want. I want you to get this right. And so you really, if you put in that early time with the film on 2 things, on the development of the script, where you really think of every angle, and if you really think of the relationships that are going to help propel you to success, and you spend time on them, your movie has a foundation that is going to succeed.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about like logistical stuff, because you do have stunts and all kinds of things happening. How much were you able to utilize local crews versus how much did you have to travel in people and put them up?
Great question. We probably 50-50 in the end. Kentucky has a lot of film production and really great crews. So we probably had 50 to 60% of our crew out of Kentucky. We had a few people from Tennessee, a handful of people from Los Angeles, a couple of people from New York. And then when we were in Iowa, I think we only had 1 or 2 Iowa crew members. So it was really mostly Kentucky. And then when we bust everybody, it was just whoever was with us. So there was plenty of local talent in Kentucky. And the only actors we brought in from out of state were our 5 leads. And actually our 5 leads plus a guy, plus a couple people who came in from Tennessee, but I kind of considered Nashville local. Nashville and Louisville were the hubs, and they were both within a couple of hours. So it was only our 5 lead actors who came from out of those 2 states.
This is a dangerous game because you're never going to know them, but you didn't by chance end up working with Kentucky Grip and Lighting down. Did you in Louisville? Like the Staley's, Stick and Steve and Nikki Staley.
I don't think so.
They're a huge company there. And I was like, I've shot a bunch with them, and
we worked with Red something. God, I recalled all these other names with the people who provided us all of our gear. I'm forgetting. I'll remember later, but no, I don't recognize this.
No, that's why I was like, this is a dangerous game because it's never going to happen. But never know. So you flew in basically just the talent, and did you bring in like your keys and the seconds and everything were local, or what was your crew distribution?
Mostly. Our AD came from Los Angeles. Let me think. Actually, line producer was New York. DP was from New York, but then almost everybody else.
But you were able to find like local gaffers and grips and all that.
We had an amazing gaffer and an amazing key grip. They were really stellar. They were gamers. They were down to do anything. They were beasts.
Did you end up doing? Was this all union or non-union?
It was a non-union film.
And except for the actors, I assume.
Except for the actors. And I meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about the script, which is, once you're a WGA writer, You have to get paid a certain amount of money. So we've as a company have focused on working with non-WGA writers. We hope they become WGA because then it means they're making a certain amount of money. But a lot of our focus on development has been working with non-WGA early in their career writers, and that's enabled us to not overspend on development. Because if you're trying to make a movie for SAG low budget, you have to keep development low. Otherwise, you will run out of cash for pre-production, other stuff like that.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm going back to kind of like, since we're talking a little tech stuff anyway, what kind of what camera lens did you use, and what was your general lighting package, and what was the strategy with it?
We used a Red Alexa. Hunter, our DP, had a great relationship with Panavision, and he got us these gorgeous Panavision lenses that were used on the movie Heat. And some other amazing famous films. So he got us a really, really cool lens deal. I can't speak that competently to our lighting package. It's not my forte.
Right, of course, yeah.
But I also wouldn't remember it that well. All I know is the way we had to build the set in Iowa was very expensive and very complex because we had to hang very heavy lights off of trusses, but we also had to fashion the grain bin steel to the top of this airplane hangar while also figuring out where we can put lights, while also figuring out how do we not make it too hot, because we had 7,000 pounds of live corn in the bin, and corn creates corn dust and it's very explosive. So we couldn't nail it with the biggest possible lights. We had to be a little bit mindful of that. So I know we had a heavy duty lighting package, and Hunter came to the table with some great lenses and a great camera, and he runs his own camera business in New York City. So he was able to kind of help us out with that, and it brought a lot to the table.
Great. So let's talk a little about that and that setup there, because it sounds amazing. I mean, most of the movie, a significant part of the movie takes place inside a grain silo. For people who have not seen it, with active corn, that was going to be another thing. How much corn was actually in there? So go ahead.
Well, actually, no, I said the 7,000 pounds, but I want to explain to you kind of how that worked. Is right. Basically what Joel Sisson did with his assistant who worked with him on the project is they built 3/4 of a bin. So then they left a huge slab open for a techno crane to come through. And the only way to really shoot this was with some sort of crane, because if you walked on the corn or if you walked on the edges of it, you'd have to reset so many times that you'd only get 3 takes of basically every scene. It would have been impossible. So we had a techno crane going through this large hole, and I'll send you a picture of this. It's really cool the way it looks. And around the edges of the bin on the inside were just tarp with corn pasted on top of it and sort of laid on a bed of steel. So it was like a trampoline, and it was fake corn, but it looked very real. And when a grain bin is having a grain issue, it's concave. It makes like this kind of shape, like a V, or it creates a bowl. So it can't just be flat. So they had to create this bowl effect. In the middle of the bowl is what Joel called the hot tub. Okay. And that had 7,000 pounds of live corn and 2 empty holes for actors. Beneath it was 5 feet of false floor, like a little maze underneath the set. So we put 2 hydraulic lifts underneath those holes. And when the scene starts, we had 2 people underneath basically operating those lifts, and the actors would give a thumbs up or thumbs down if they were like under the corn and nervous, or a thumbs up if they were fine and they should keep going. And so we had to recreate all the sound in post with a company called Sim, who I know you're familiar with because I just heard from Rob and Stephanie, who I thought was an amazing, informative podcast. We had to just yell out cues because we did a single shot. It was a 1 shot. So it was a 2-minute shot where the grain starts to sink and the guys start to go underneath. And so we built this 3/4 of a set, ant farm style. We had these 2 hydraulic lifts, these 2 holes, 7,000 pounds of active corn in the hot tub, and then a bunch of different cheats for us to be able to get lighting and camera and HMU in there. But it was an amazing undertaking. But God, I don't know how we got it done.
I'm listening to it. I'm like,
that
is quite a build. Like, that's a legitimate set build, like,
yeah,
pretty massive. And that was, again, like, I'm guessing most of that came through like your relationship that you made with the people with the grain
Sukup manufacturing. So they had 10 guys working around the clock for 2 weeks with Joel. So they literally dedicated a team of people who were not doing their usual revenue generating business to help us do this. And just anecdotally, 3 weeks before the film started, the patriarch of their family, Eugene, who started the business, passed away. And I asked their foreman, John, who was like our main guy, like, are you guys still going to do this? Like, I don't want to be insensitive, but we're really relying on it. And he said, if the Sukup family said they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Doesn't matter what happens. So they still devoted so much time and energy to it. And they had so much fun with it. Like, they were on set a lot and they thought it was cool. And the actors did tours of their facility nearby. So it just became one big happy family kind of behind the scenes.
Man, that is just truly an incredible story that build and that all happened. I wish I could see. I can't wait to see the photos of it. I wish I could see the actual like set, because it sounds so exciting.
I wish we still had it. It would be like a cool but maybe insensitive but cool theme park ride. But I have pictures and I have some time lapses. I'll send you some stuff to check out.
So I have a question about your tax. So whenever you made this deal with Kentucky in the beginning and they gave you the money against a tax incentive, that was for a certain amount of time and money spent in Kentucky. But because you were shooting in Iowa, you had to make sure that didn't cross that and didn't diminish the amount of money you spent in Kentucky, right?
Great point. It did diminish the amount, but we did the financials and it was worth it because of the value Sukup was bringing to the table. But
okay, got it.
It did diminish. It lowered our budget basically. And it lowered the amount of money we could borrow from our lender, but it came out way in our favor. But yeah,
you didn't have to pay for the set pieces and all that other stuff. Exactly. So the in-kind compensated so much that the cash drop didn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. So what was your distribution, screenings, and finishing like? Like, what was? Let's actually, I guess you can take me through post-production through then what happens to the film next.
So I'll just be very honest with you about how this process went. I felt like we had a really incredible screenplay and that we were doing something really unique. And I have a lot of really good connections in the industry, and my company's represented by William Morris Endeavor, and I thought that because we had the goods, that this would come together more easily. But we were rejected by a lot of companies within the industry. And we weren't really able to pull together any financing or really very much interest at all from the industry itself. And so when that happened, it kind of clicked for me that if that happened before the movie was made, there's no guarantee that the industry is going to embrace this movie after it's made. So I better figure out, if I don't necessarily get the kind of film festival release or distribution offer that will make investors their money back, but more importantly, actually have an impact on eyeballs watching my movie, I've got to really, sorry about saying my movie, that's ridiculous. It's our movie. It was a beast. My business partner, myself, and the millions of crew members, but I say my movie. It's simpler, but it's
I think people understand that it's everybody's movie, but it's really, you have to have an individual ownership.
The reason I say it, it's really more my company, because Silo Film LLC is a company and I'm the CEO of it, so maybe that's even a better word. But make no mistake, it was our movie, and I knew that that it would be hard to get this distributed. It wasn't your average kind of indie movie that would get into Sundance. And so early on, we decided that as we were discussing the making of the movie with our agricultural partners, we would keep tabs on all of them and make sure that if we ever had to distribute direct to market, we could work with them on that as well. So I'll come back to that in a minute, because distribution-wise, we pitched our investors. We said, listen, if we're not in the 1% of 1% that get into Sundance and make money for you, we will figure out how to sell this movie because we know we have something special. So that was like in my investor deck that I sent to people to give us money for this film. And so when the movie was done, which was I think it was September 5th or 6th or 7th, 2018, we took a month, maybe two to 3 weeks off, started post posting in New York. Worked with a great editor named Ryan Kendrick. Worked with Nice Dissolve as our post facility. We worked with Sim. They did our sound. Worked with Company 3. They did our coloring and delivery. And it took a few months to get the film into shape. There were definitely some interesting behind the scenes dialogues about how to make the most out of the footage that we had. We definitely rewrote the film in post. If you read the script and you watched the movie, you'd see a totally different opening and closing scene, which is a big part of any movie. And so we totally rewrote that in post because of something very special that happened on set with our lead character, Junior, the actor Jim Parrick. He has a monologue that just was mostly improvised that captured the heart of the film. And so we edited for however many months, probably 6, I'd say 4 to 6 months. Then we got into the technical parts of the process. We brought on board an original song from a country music singer named Easton Corbin, which got a lot of attention from people in the agricultural community who were hearing about our movie and were asking, when's it coming out? And so once this country music song was in the film, and once we had a movie that we were really proud to share, I connected with a guy named Matt Youngman, who runs the largest outdoor farm machinery show in the world. It's called the Farm Progress Show. And I said, listen, we're probably going to want to distribute this movie from the inside of the country towards the coast, not the other way around. We know we have a core audience that's very interested in farming, in farm accidents. Agriculture is the single most dangerous occupation in America, and grain entrapments happen 35, 40, 45 times a year, more than half of them in fatalities, more than half of them people who are teenagers.
Right. I read that.
More than half of them are teenagers, meaning who get stuck, not necessarily who pass away.
Right, who pass away. Yeah.
And so Matt said, listen, we've never done anything like this before, but I will give you a free plot of land for you to do a release of your film, for you to do like a blowout thing. So I just said yes. I didn't know what the hell we were going to do at that point in terms of actually getting people to watch the movie, but I knew that that would unleash marketing and publicity for us within agriculture in rural America. And I knew that everybody who was anybody in agriculture would be there. They have, I think, 250,000 individual ticket buyers every year, but then every huge farm company, every huge farm journalist, every big magazine, they cover it. It's like going to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, or it's like going to Cannes, the film festival. It's a huge farm festival for the industry. And so we said yes, I think in April or May, right after we had finished post and all that stuff. And part of the way we got that done is that Easton Corbin, the country music singer, agreed to come perform at the show, the original song he did for the film. So that was kind of a big piece of getting that moving. And then we started to ask ourselves, okay, cool. We're going to have a captive audience. Okay. What can we do to ensure that our movie is seen in a way that we feel is true to the spirit of the film, which is it's a movie about community. It's about a community banding together to save a life. That's the main theme of our film. There are a few things. I'd say for me, that's the one that really sticks. It always stuck for me as a New York City kid who was approached by a kid who grew up in a rural country, Marshall, part of the country. And he explained to me how much he loved the people he grew up around, and he wanted to make a movie about agriculture. So that stuck with me from the beginning, and that was sort of still ringing in my ears. And then secondly, how do we make money? How do you make money distributing a movie? What's a way to pay back investors $1 million+? That's a lot of money. If you think about it, let's say you're doing a theatrical release, okay? And let's say you own half the film once a distributor gets it from you. And then they own half the film once a theatrical distributor puts it out there, exhibitor. So you're owning 25% of a ticket that comes in after they've spent print and advertising. So let's say on a good day, you're selling a $10 ticket and you're getting $2 of that ticket. That means you have to sell to make your investors their money back at least 500,000 individual tickets to a film. That is right. That's 500,000 people have to go see your film. That is tough. That is really, really tough. I think it's why you see today with a saturated market with so many movies that people go to theatrical more or less to push interest in their VOD or digital release. The movies that make money in theatrical are the every now and again horror film that blows up, the animated movies, and the tentpoles. It's so rare that you get another kind of movie that makes money. Yeah, Hidden Figures probably did really well. even movies
Moonlight.
like, yeah, exactly. So, you'll get Moonlight, you'll get,
But those are by far the exception. Like
there's
by
such
far, by far, by
crazy
far.
exceptions,
Yeah.
crazy exceptions. So we decided we would do something pretty unique. We would create a licensing model. And we didn't invent this. I know a great company called Picture Motion. I don't know if they invented it, but it feels like they did because they do it so damn well. Christy Marchese runs it. She's an old friend. We worked together 10 years ago. Picture Motion does a lot of educational licensing of movies. So, for example, they worked on Won't You Be My Neighbor? Okay, the Mr. Rogers documentary, and they did all the university screenings of that film. So they created an educational curriculum, probably a nonprofit element to it, and then they would license the film to universities, and it would be excess revenue for the film, but also a philanthropic endeavor. I loved that model, and I figured maybe we can make that our primary model, not a secondary or tertiary or later one. Maybe our business model can be we license the film with an educational curriculum around farm safety and mental health and agriculture directly to farm communities or any community that wants to watch it. So we launched that concept at the Farm Progress Show. And within a week, we had 150 requests for the film. Within a month, we had 300. By now, I think we have over 750 individual requests for the movie, and we licensed the movie for $2,500. So it's an expensive licensing fee. But if you amortize that out, and you're a community organizer, you're a farm bureau, which is a local farm community group, or you're John Deere and you're a local tractor dealer, and you want to bring an audience together. If 300 people were going to the movie theater that weekend, they'd be spending an aggregate in excess of $2,500. So for them, they're not selling tickets, but they're saying this is promotional value. This is sponsorship value. Maybe I can bring our community together in a unique way, get them in a room watching a movie about agriculture. Furthermore, so few independent films or films in general are made about rural America. And if they are, they're usually about like a backwoods murder or a drug dealer or something that's not necessarily a positive representation of rural American values. And every part of our country has issues. We can get into a political dialogue and all that stuff because there's a huge difference between rural and urban America. But my experience with farmers, my personal experience, they're incredibly kind people and they will be there for their neighbor. And that's ultimately what Silo ends up showing. So we've done 200 screenings of the film. Which is, almost $500,000 in revenue. And we haven't even done any theatrical or digital or broadcast release yet. We've just sent Blu-ray DVDs with a return label prepaid to individual community organizers. They show the film to their community. They do a panel discussion afterwards about farm safety and mental health and things that are important to their area. And it's been incredibly gratifying and successful from a philanthropic standpoint. I feel like we've had a huge impact. And I could say without a shadow of a doubt that we've saved lives, that people have watched, an older farmer or a teenager's watched our movie and not done the dangerous thing they do in the movie because they've watched it. But then also we have a viable business model to try and pay our investors back and make another movie, which ultimately would be a big part of the goal. COVID has rocked us because nobody is doing community organizing events, doesn't matter where you are. So we've turned our model into a digital model. We're doing the same exact thing, except we're creating unique websites for communities. So silofilm.com/Stephen Pierce. And then you can bring it to your community and you get a special password and you get a curriculum and it's all the same stuff, but it's a digital movie theater. And we're trying to reinvigorate as best we can. And I'm sure we'll do a wider digital release in the coming months. But right now we're still sort of in this bespoke self-distribution model until further notice. And I do think our goal is to release this in a wide digital way come early 2021, because I want people to be able to see the movie, especially like people in cities who, there's a lot more competition. It's not as easy to raise that kind of licensing money. But if you are listening to this podcast and you're an independent movie theater, we're in a place now where we will work with anybody. We want people to see the film and we want people to learn from its lessons and just have a positive impact. So, but it's been cool. It's been a cool journey this last year.
Yeah, that sounds like it. I mean, I love hearing about the alternative distribution model. That's like the educational aspect is one that many films can't take advantage of because it's their subject matter. It doesn't have anything, but that's so clever that you were able to start that as a primary distribution at the beginning, because now you still have the other, I guess you could call them windows, you can still exploit later on. So that's very exciting.
We still have the windows and, it's just any movie has a niche audience. It could be the biggest niche audience in the world. It could be a tiny niche audience. But I believe if you know your audience and you can tap into them and make them super fans, your movie can be a financial success, because then you'll build word of mouth. That first concentric circle will get to another one, to another one, to another one, to another one. And eventually you'll pick up momentum and you'll become a cultural phenomenon of some sort, even if it's not as big as Moonlight. It could still be a success in its own lane.
Right. Absolutely. So it's been fantastic talking to you. I want to make sure we're respectful of your time here. So if people want to learn more about you, your company, where can they go?
So Silo is on silothefilm.com, SILOTHEFILM.com. And we're on all the social media platforms at Silo the Film. My company is Blood Orange Pictures. Probably best thing to do is just throw us into IMDb to see what we're up to. We've made a couple of cool movies and short films, and we have a couple of great TV shows in development at studios. But Silo has really been the main project, and I'd still like to get on a newsletter and make sure that people can see it when it comes out, because it could be sooner than anticipated too. And I just want to say what you guys are doing with your company is a huge service to the industry. And I love your branding. I love what you're doing. I love the guests that you've had on. I just really admire it. So I'm very grateful for this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind of you to say. I know it's all a lie. So as soon as you got off here, you'll tell me what you really think. But no, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sam.
You guys are an awesome company. It's nice to connect with you guys.
Excellent talk from a very well-informed producer, I would say.
That's as comprehensive as a story of making an indie film as you could possibly want.
Yeah.
I mean, from start to finish. But you know what really stood out to me was, as we got in later, the alternative distribution strategy that they picked up. Kind of, he built off the education model where you're licensing films. The film's been out for a year. They're already making revenue off of all these. That is clever thinking. Really, really well done.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about him, and my big takeaway from him, is he really went into all of this, even when things happen that he didn't plan for. Like, he gets a phone call where, the head of a company wants to meet him and, to talk about sponsorship. He's done so much prep work in that he planned out so much of the business side of what he was going to do beforehand. Even if it was something unexpected, he still had options and ideas, and so much prep work done and planning on his side.
We've not talked to anybody that's commissioned a script yet. So that was interesting, because that really got me thinking. Like, there are other ways. You don't have to be the writer, director, producer, everything. There are ways, and you can do it and not super expensive.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to seeing how, obviously COVID has thrown a wrench into the works with, pretty much every film that was coming out this year. But I'm looking forward to seeing how they move forward. And I have no doubt that they will, because they have a great story, they have a great end product, and they have, once again, a very passionate team. And I think the movie will resonate with a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they come out of this and how they get to the other side of distribution. Yeah.
Another big takeaway is all that in kind, building a community. That's what they did. They built a community to surround the film when they made it. They got all that massive in kind for that silo, and from the locals that wanted to help them. They were actively interested in the story and their success. And then they built that community around the distribution. Again, I mean, that's indie filmmaking. That's what it is.
It's huge. And again, I just can't stress enough. I would really recommend this episode to so many people getting into indie filmmaking and indie filmmaking producing, because when it comes to takeaways, I think every other sentence from that guy was a takeaway.
Yeah, every other sentence. You could listen to that whole episode and just take notes. Like that's really how you make a movie, from top to tail. That's it.
Filmmaking is a collaborative experience, and so is this podcast. Please take a second to subscribe so you know about future episodes, and leave a review. It really does help us. For more information about today's guest, visit independentfilmmakersguide.com to see links to the episode in video and article form. IFG is a community, and we want to help you in your filmmaking process.
Hi, I'm Brett, a producer from New York City, and I'm reading the credits. IFG is created by Framework Productions. This episode was directed by James Allardyce, produced and edited by Matt Mundy and Audrey Ray McHale, and hosted by Stephen Pierce. The music is by Glassboy. Find his music on freemusic.org. See and listen to all the IFG episodes, plus bonus content at independentfilmmakersguide.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey friends, we just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about two personal things. First, we wanted to thank you, our listening community, and our wonderful guests, learning so much together along the way and continuing to learn, sharing our stories, making a lot of new friends, and collaborating, which is exactly what this is all about. Which also brings me to my second point. In great part to many of these new relationships, we wanted to let you know that we've taken a lot of this advice ourselves and made our own narrative feature film, Herd, H-E-R-D, Herd, which is premiering this October on Friday the 13th in select theaters as well as on VOD. Personally, I think it's the perfect kind of scary movie to watch during our favorite scary season. So we'd love for you to celebrate with us and watch Herd. You can pre-order it on Apple TV, and of course, do the communal thing, see it in theaters. Of course, for all of this, please see our show notes, but basically, we're going to keep it all updated at herd.film. That's herd.film, herd.film as well. Thank you again. And be sure to give us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to build this community and collaborate. IFG, how movies get made.